Hello and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. The year of 2017 is set to become a turning point in the country's judiciary system, as Ukraine's government claims the justice sector is about to undergo major constitutional changes. Experts outline the main 7 ambitious goals set to be achieved by the end of the year. To talk about them and the judiciary reform overall in Ukraine, we are joined in the studio today by Mikhaylo Zhernakov. He is an expert of the Reanimation Package of Reforms. Hello, and thank you for joining.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, as I have already mentioned, the experts outline the main 7 goals that are set to be achieved by the end of the year in Ukraine's judiciary system. Could you specify what are they?
I would like to know, because we usually identify 3 or 4, which are the main pillars of the reform, one of them being the renewal of the judiciary. So we want to change the old bad judges with the new ones and the good ones. And that I think is the main goal of the reform. Of course, the other ones are depolitization of the judicial system and raising accountability of justice and the judiciary, which is also very important, because never in 26 years of Ukraine's independence, the judiciary of Ukraine was fully accountable.
Unfortunately. And let's be honest, right now, Ukrainian society doesn't really trust the judiciary system.
The level of trust to judiciary in 2015, the number of people who trusted courts completely, was below 1%. That's even lower than the level of trust to Russian media at the moment. That's how bad it was. So, and it still is. The overall level of trust is below 10%, and that's of course critically low. That's something that we want to raise.
Any forecast how that may change once the reform is actually implemented?
Well, the reason why the level of trust is so low is because of the performance of the judiciary. We don't have a lot of problems in the public perception. It all lies in how the judiciary actually acts. So when we have the judiciary which is accountable, which provides good decisions, which provides justice to people, then we'll have a raise in the level of trust. Before that, I doubt that will be the case.
But how many years will it take for Ukrainian people to actually start trusting the judiciary system?
I think it will, because Ukrainians are very, should I say, hungry, or are very expecting very much just decisions by the courts. So the moment that we start getting the decisions that are not politically biased in the important cases, because the vast majority of cases in the courts, of course, are not politically centered or you know, are of interest of political forces. That is why, but they are left unnoticed because they're not in the media. They're not as publicly perceived as very important for the state itself and the public. At the moment we start getting the important decisions that are in favor of people, in favor of what people think is right, and not in favor of oligarchs or politicians, that moment I think we will experience a big rise in public trust to the judiciary.
Does that mean that politicians will actually get punished for being corrupt or doing something wrong?
Well, exactly. That's one of the things that we are looking into, is making also political power accountable, making justice work for everybody. If you commit crime, if you're guilty, then you go to jail no matter what, no matter either you are a teacher in the countryside or you're a member of the parliament. That's what people want, and that's something, just punishment for those who commit crime, including corruption. That's something that will define whether we have work in judiciary, whether we have function in judiciary, and whether people will trust it or not.
Speaking of corruption, it has been announced that in the matter of performing the judiciary reform, anti-corruption courts are going to appear in Ukraine. And we're all well aware of the fact that over the past several years, a lot of anti-corruption institutions have already appeared in Ukraine. Does that mean that anti-corruption courts are going to be just making the works of previously created anti-corruption institutions more effective, or are they going to be functioning on their own?
First of all, yes, this is true. We've achieved huge progress in creating new, trustworthy anti-corruption institutions that deal with high-profile corruption. National Anti-Corruption Bureau, specialized anti-corruption prosecution. But unfortunately, we don't have a court yet that will kind of close this
process
link,
the decisions, right?
of this anti-corruption chain, and provide for fair and trustworthy decisions. Unfortunately, our courts still need several years before, even in the best case scenario, when if everything goes as planned, which will probably not, we will need several years in order to finish the reform. We don't have these years before we start fighting corruption for real. That is why the court cases are stalled in the courts. Whatever NABU and SAPO submit to Ukrainian courts, there's dozens of cases in which there wasn't a single court hearing in a year. So that's why.
That's outstanding.
Exactly. So and it's different practice. The courts take other cases and they stall these ones, and there's practically nothing we can do. Unfortunately, the High Council of Justice, which is a disciplinary body, is also quite dysfunctional in bringing judges to justice and making them, say, pay for not doing that. So in order to have these courts, in order to have these cases finalized and starting finally putting people to jail who deserve that, we have to have anti-corruption courts established right now.
What about the judges? What's going to be the process of picking judges to the high court institutions? Is it going to change?
The main goal or the main difference with the anti-corruption court would be the selection procedure. At least that's something that the civil society experts and the international donor community that is active in anti-corruption fight in Ukraine is proposing. Because we already see, even though we have some progress in selecting judges, it's become more transparent. We're now building a new Supreme Court from scratch. Yes. But there we faced some problems because at least 30 out of 120 finalists or shortlisted candidates do not correspond to the criteria of integrity and professional ethics.
What's going to happen to those who do not correspond?
Well, hopefully they will be banned by High Council of Justice, but we don't know yet because it's a process in which the judges themselves, the old judges, decide who goes and who stays.
But how does it make it relevant then?
Well, unfortunately, we implemented this standard, this European standard, that in the High Council of Justice and other judicial councils, there should be a majority of judges elected by judges. But unfortunately, we let the old judges elect their representatives to these bodies, which again appoint new judges. So we kind of created a loop in which the old system never. Can never be moved out. Exactly. So that is why we want. It works in a way, but then in other ways it doesn't. But we can't afford that with these experiments with the anti-corruption court, because all the cases of grand corruption are always linked to the powerful people in the country who own the politics.
Yes.
So that is why we have to have them as detached from the old system as possible.
Is there any chance our former President Viktor Yanukovych could actually serve the punishment once the anti-corruption courts are established in Ukraine?
If there are cases in which there's only a certain scope of articles of criminal code which are under NABU's and SAPO's investigation. Yeah. So if there's one of these articles, then definitely he would go under the competence of the anti-corruption court. But again, I have to stress, in order to select these judges properly to the anti-corruption court, what we propose is the special selection procedure in which, or the special stage of selection procedure in which the international experts would be on the panel selecting these judges. This way we kind of detach the selection procedure from the old system as much as possible and make it more transparent, more trustworthy, and make it more objective, because there would be members of the panel who do not experience any influence from the politicians. That's, by the way, how NABU and SAPO were selected, with the participation of foreign experts, and that's something that made them really independent and really trustworthy and effective. So that's something that we want to make for the anti-corruption court. In this case, these judges will be independent, they will be protected, they will know that they won their position, that were appointed because of the objective criteria, because of who they are and what they can do, but not because of their somebody in the in the big cabinet in the big offices told somebody else to appoint them. So that is why that's what we want to do. And that's how we want the anti-corruption court to be formed. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of resistance in the political so-called elite.
And that's understandable.
Of course.
You've mentioned judges' protection. How does the state plan to protect the judges who are selected to perform in anti-corruption courts? Because clearly they could be in danger.
Oh, absolutely. We have to have these protection enhanced times compared to what we have now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we experience difficulties with protecting the courtrooms and the court buildings because of the changes in the governance of the police and other law enforcement bodies that are supposed to guard the courts as a part of the reform. When it comes to anti-corruption courts, of course, there's millions and billions of dirty money that will be investigated, and of course that's a lot of interests of corrupt so-called elites. So that is why, of course, these judges could be endangered. Again, what we propose is to have maximum security for these judges, such as the witness protection programs in the US or other developed countries, also to the point where, if needed, the judge and their family would be moved out of the country to some other country, and the state would cover that as well, and of course the cost and everything. So if we want to fight corruption for real, we have to be ready that the real things may occur. So
yeah, some people might not like it.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, that's why.
The Ukrainian government and a lot of community activists in Ukraine actually take part in implementing the judiciary reform. What about the international partners of Ukraine? How big of a part do they take?
I must say, without the international partners, we wouldn't be able to achieve 95% of what we achieved with reforms-wise, and I'm serious here, because again, unfortunately, we always have a joke that we kind of have this sandwich effect, that the civil society pushes from one side and the international community pushes from the other, and that's how we make our government.
And the project is in the middle.
Okay. And that's how we make our government do things. Or the other one is that the civil society of Ukraine is not a watchdog of reforms, but rather a sled dog for reforms process. So, but again, we wouldn't be as effective without the international community, both technical support and the political support. Yeah. So that is why, when it comes to judicial reform, though, sometimes the European standards that we're using are not working for us. For example, the standard of majority of judges elected by judges, it is fine when the justice system works as a justice system. It's not as fine when a big part of justice system works as an organized crime. Yeah. So that is why we have to be cautious and also vigorous, in
absolutely
making the reforms effective, and cautious in applying standards in the view of what is needed for the reform and what should be effective. But otherwise, again, I have to stress the international community, the involvement of international community, the technical assistance, the political assistance is crucial for reforms process, and I would very much like to call the international community to continue doing that, to continue pushing our government, to continue providing us with the tools to achieve more and more.
Thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for this informative conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
We really hope that the judiciary reform undergoes in Ukraine, and it will be quite effective, and the Ukrainian community will find more trust in the judiciary system.
We hope so too.
That was Mikhaylo Zhernakov. He is an expert of the Reanimation Package of Reforms in Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.